How's it going, everyone? My name is Dan, but you can call me Malone, and recently I watched Graham Stefan's video talking about how to achieve financial independence in 10 years. And I also watched Richard Coffin, aka the Plain Bagels video, where he talked about how investing is often marketed as a means for getting rich quick, and how this is a disconnection from reality in 99.9% of cases. Both of these videos made some really interesting points about the viability of investing as a means for achieving high net worth over a relatively short period of time. That got me thinking about the growth and popularity of the financial independence retire early or FIRE movement, and how more and more people are buying into this idea of getting wealthy through investing and frugal living. After all, YouTube channels like Graham's, Richard's, and the variety of other personal finance creators who have cropped up over the years are making all of this information extremely accessible. I wanted to give my thoughts on whether or not I think it's actually possible for the average person to achieve financial independence through investing and frugal living alone, specifically over a short period of time like 10 years. Because let's be real, more often than not, the people who are watching videos on this topic are regular people with regular jobs and regular problems. So it's very important to be transparent about the realities of actually going and doing this for the average person, not the person who's already earning a $250,000 annual salary. So over the next 10 minutes or so, I'll give you my perspective on the topic, and I'll also build on some of the points made by Graham and Richard in their videos. Before we get started, can I ask that you take just 2 seconds out of your day to show your support by leaving a like in the video and commenting down below with your thoughts on achieving financial independence and retiring early. If you're new around here, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get started. Alright, so the key message in Graham's video is that in order to have any hope of retiring in the next 10 years, starting from nothing today, you'll need to earn more, spend less, and save as much money as possible. The obvious stuff. For the sake of clarity, the act of saving money in this conversation actually refers to the act of investing for the most part. We're not talking about storing massive amounts of cash in the bank, only to be eaten away by inflation. We're talking about making investments in order to allow that cash to grow over time. Graham says that you need to be saving between 65 and 90% of your income every year in order to retire early. The median wage for workers in the US in the second quarter of 2022 was $54,132. If we were to assume that the average viewer earns around that amount, saving 65% of their income would require the average viewer to live off of $1,579 per month before tax. Clearly, that's not going to be sustainable, given that the average renter in the US is currently paying $1,322 per month in rent alone. However, Graham isn't suggesting that you should be saving 65 to 90% of your income on a salary of $54K. He's saying that you need to increase your income to such a level that allows you to save 65 to 90% of what you earn. That's the crux of his video. Think about it logically. In order to save a significant amount of money, you either need to cut back on your expenses or earn more money, or indeed a combination of both. Many people who support the financial independence retire early movement will tell you to live as frugally as possible in order to cut back on expenses. Graham gives some examples of how you might do that, like house hacking, driving used cars, cooking at home, buying cheap clothes. You get the idea. However, I have 3 problems with this idea of frugal living, or at least the way it's marketed online. Number 1, there is only so much that you can cut back on before your standard of living starts to severely deteriorate. Now granted, many people are guilty of having a standard of living that doesn't line up with how much they earn, and they would probably benefit from having that pulled back a bit. But any sort of notion that you should drive yourself into the ground all in the name of retiring early, especially on an average salary, is lunacy. So don't do it. This is why increasing your income is the better and more sustainable way to go if you are going to attempt to retire early through aggressive saving. Number 2, thinking that frugal living is as easy as just doing it in 2022 is a total disconnection from reality. Inflation is at multi-decade highs pretty much everywhere globally, which has led to an increase in the price of food, drink, transportation, you name it. European countries are experiencing a severe cost of living crisis due to the price of energy, and with global central banks increasing interest rates, mortgage holders are under significant pressure. It's not as easy as just cutting back on spending. People aren't seeing their salaries increase at the same rate as inflation, meaning every year inflation persists, it becomes harder and harder to support yourself, let alone save more. Anyone who does think that it really is as easy as just being frugal is probably in a privileged position themselves, and frankly shouldn't be listened to. Number 3, life gets in the way. It is rarely mentioned in any of these retire early videos that life is unpredictable. Wouldn't it be great if we could all be frugal and save 80% of our income with certainty every year for the next 10 years? Of course it would, but for most people that's not going to be the case. Even if you have a high income and are saving a significant percentage of that income today, that could all change tomorrow. A recent article from A Wealth of Common Sense put this very well. People change jobs, they move, they make more money, they make less money, they get laid off, they have kids, they have unexpected expenses, they endure health scares, they spend frivolously, and all of the other things life throws at you. Everyone is going to have good years and bad years depending on their job, geographic location, circumstances, and luck. So you can try and be frugal to the best of your ability, but there are going to be years where it's just not possible, and that's normal. I suppose my main issue with how frugality is marketed online is that everyone ignores how improbable it is for the average person to be consistently frugal. For that reason, increasing your income to achieve an early retirement is definitely the lesser of two evils. Now, when it comes to the discussion of increasing your income, anyone with an ounce of common sense is going to say something like, well, obviously that would be nice, but how am I actually going to do it? Not talk about it, do it. And that's a very important question, because let's be real, how many of the people watching these retire early videos who hear the obvious advice of increase your income actually go and do it? I'd wager a very small percentage. That's because, once again, it's not as easy as how it is marketed. Graham offers up 3 potential ways of doing it: learning a new skill, combing the job market for better opportunities, and starting a side hustle. Yes, each of these has the potential to increase your income, but it would be naive to think that it's as easy as just doing any one of them today and seeing instant results. They all take time. Mastering a new skill to the point where it translates into higher paying opportunities, changing your line of work to have greater earnings potential, starting, building, and scaling a side hustle to the point where it's generating meaningful income. It all takes time. I'm not here to give you the answer on how you can increase your income, nor am I here to make all of this sound impossible, because it isn't. I am here to pose to you, the average person, that maybe this way of retiring early isn't for you, and maybe that's totally okay. But if you're still not sure, let's have a conversation about the realities of investing your money with the intention of living off of those investments alone. Then you'll see just how many things need to be considered in order to have any chance of doing this successfully. Our ability to retire early is pretty much entirely predicated on our ability to A, invest as much as possible, and B, achieve a return on our investments that allows us to retire. In other words, we ain't retiring early unless our money is constantly growing. In Graham's video, he gives the example of an individual earning $70,000 who invests 70% of what they earn at a 5% annual return on investment. That person would be able to retire in just under 9 years if they continue to do that every year. This calculator assumes that retirement is the point at which your annual return on investment fully covers your annual expenses. In other words, the point at which you're living off of your investments. There's a couple of points to note about these assumptions for the average person. The salary of $70,000 is obviously above average, and the savings rate of 70% is very high. In reality, it's going to be very difficult to maintain that savings rate for the guts of 9 years, especially in the context of what we were talking about earlier regarding inflation and life getting in the way. The estimated 5% annual return on investment is actually very reasonable. Now, you might be saying, doesn't the S&P 500 return about 10% annually on average? Yes, it does, but that 10% doesn't consider taxation, inflation, or fees, all of which are unavoidable. In Richard Coffin's video, he notes that an annual return of about 5.4% after taxation, inflation, and fees have been accounted for is more accurate. He also talks about how it's unreasonable for the average investor to expect a return that consistently outperforms the market. If the professionals can't do it, neither will you, so forget it. So the fact that this calculator is using a 5% return is good, but it's the withdrawal rate that I want to spend a bit of time discussing. The withdrawal rate is essentially the amount that you're going to take out of your investments for spending purposes each year in retirement. The reason why this is set as 4% is because of a study called the Trinity study. The Trinity study found that an individual could spend 4% of their wealth each year with relative confidence that they would never run out of money. Think about it. You've invested all of this money to retire early, which is great, but if when you retire, you end up withdrawing money at a faster rate than the money is growing, you're inevitably going to run out. In other words, in order to live off of your investments alone with certainty, your money needs to be growing at a faster rate than the rate at which you're spending it. And this is especially true for anyone planning on retiring in their 30s or 40s. You've got a lot longer to live, and that's a lot of living that needs to be paid paid for. So how do you become certain that your money is going to grow by a sufficient margin to cover the cost of what could be 50 plus years in retirement? A guy called Baptiste Vicht, who runs the website thepoorSwiss.com, also wanted to answer that question. His analysis found that the 4% withdrawal rule from the Trinity study is not safe for any retirement periods in excess of 30 years, and that a withdrawal rate of around 3% is more prudent. If that was applied in Graham's example, it would take the individual 11 years instead of 9 to retire. Baptiste also found that in order to have any chances of success in doing this, at least 50% of your portfolio needs to be stocks. That's because stocks provide the best protection from inflation, but stocks also have a tendency to be quite volatile in the short to medium term. So it's not as easy as just having 100% invested in stocks either, because that will significantly increase the chances of you bombing out in the short term. Also, to assume that we're going to withdraw and spend a fixed amount of money each year in retirement isn't realistic. Once again, life gets in the way, and we might have an unexpected need to withdraw a large sum of money from our portfolio. That in turn could significantly impact our chances of living off of our investments with certainty. We also mentioned inflation. Inflation inherently prevents us from withdrawing a fixed amount of money each year to fund our lifestyles. Why? Because prices naturally increase over time, so a fixed withdrawal rate will potentially buy you less and less each year. Here's an example. Say we have a portfolio of $1 million. We plan on withdrawing 4% of that portfolio each year to fund our lifestyle, and we'll assume an annual investment return of 5%. In year one of retirement, we take out $40,000 and our balance would grow by $48,000, meaning going into year two, our portfolio will be valued at $1,008,000. Now say that inflation between year one and year two was 2%. In order to be able to afford the same lifestyle in year two as in year one, we'd need to withdraw $40,800, i.e. an increase of 2%. However, if we stuck to the 4% fixed withdrawal rule, we would only withdraw $40,320, leaving us $480 short. So if you want to maintain a consistent standard of living throughout retirement, you're going to need to adjust your withdrawal rate to account for inflation. The point of all of this is to show you that there is so much more to consider than just earning more, spending less, and investing as much as possible. Actually going and retiring early from investing alone and managing to live off of those investments for the rest of your life is an extremely difficult task. If I'm being honest, to retire in 10 years and to maintain that retirement for decades would require an income of at least 100 grand, commitment to a consistent low-cost lifestyle and the good fortune to be able to maintain that lifestyle, luck in the stock market, knowledge of how to correctly balance your portfolio post-retirement, low inflation, and good fortune to not have a need to withdraw large amounts. On top of all of that, tax is going to be higher in some countries than others, inflation is going to be higher, salaries are going to be lower. There is so much variability to consider depending on the person who's trying to achieve this and from where in the world they're trying to achieve it. I personally don't think it's worthwhile for the average person to attempt retiring in 10 years through investing alone. If it's early retirement you're looking for, start a business. That's where real wealth comes from. Am I saying that the average person shouldn't invest or be conscious of their spending? Of course not. I'm saying that there is much more to using investing as a means to retire early than the marketing material might suggest. If instead you have a realistic expectation for how early you'll retire from investing alone, and provided you avail of the highly tax efficient retirement accounts that are designed for this purpose, you'll be alright. But one thing is certain, there are realistic ways to increase your chances of retiring before the normal retirement age, outside of investing and frugal living. One such way is knowing how to pay less tax. Check out this next video if you want to learn about the most common and effective ways to reduce your tax bill, which are used by the wealthiest in our society every day. It could save you thousands. I'll see you soon.